Mohammed Hadi al-Harmali is in his 80s. He's been uprooted 4 times by the shifting front lines of Yemen's civil war. Out of money and bedridden, he's now confined to a tent in a makeshift camp outside Marib city, east of the capital Sana'a.
Winter has come and we have children, large families, poor families. They need blankets, mattresses, shelters and ways to keep warm, blankets and bedding. They need tents and they need places to live.
Of the estimated 1 million displaced people in Marib city, 80% are women and children. Aid agencies say the humanitarian needs far outstrip the capacity on the ground. The city has crowded camps, an overstretched public service and healthcare system, and an increasingly vulnerable host community.
If you receive 200 to 300 patients and all the patients need full free services, this leads to big pressure on the hospital, especially with the lack of medicines. Medicines are in great demand, in addition to laboratory solutions for examinations and other things.
World powers have struggled to engineer the truce needed to revive talks to end the conflict that has displaced millions and left them with little or no food. As winter settles in, doctors say they have reached breaking point and are concerned about the rising number of flu and COVID-19 cases.
There's a high demand amid weak and scarce capabilities of the hospital to treat patients, especially as we are ahead of winter, and in this season, the diseases increase very significantly. As it is well known, displaced people live in camps, and this leads to an increase in the number of cases, especially in the current stage.
Aid workers warn an escalation of violence in Marib could lead to further displacement. They are urging governments and leaders around the world to help the people of Yemen. Humera Chaudhry, Al Jazeera.
Latest news, Saudi and Yemen. Biden administration approved $650 million weapons sale to Saudi Arabia. The Saudi-led coalition says troops redeploying, not withdrawing. It's the latest news. Al Jazeera. Headliner, Biden administration approved $650 million weapons sale to Saudi Arabia, dated November 4th, 2021. The United States has approved a $650 million sale of air-to-air missiles to Saudi Arabia, the Pentagon announced, what would be the Biden administration's first major weapons deal with the Gulf Kingdom. In a statement on Thursday, the Pentagon said the U.S. State Department approved the sale to help Riyadh counter current and future threats. This proposed sale will support U.S. foreign policy and national security of the United States by helping to improve the security of a friendly country that continues to be an important force for political and economic progress in the Middle East, the Pentagon said. And added the Massachusetts-based from Raytheon would be the principal contractor for the sale of AIM 120C-7C8 Advanced Medium-Range Air-to-Air Missiles, or the AMR-AAM, and other related equipment. The sale comes months after President Joe Biden said he would end U.S. support for Saudi Arabia's offensive weapons in Yemen, including relevant arms sales. The State Department's Bureau of Political Military Affairs noted in a series of tweets on Thursday that the missiles are not used to engage ground targets. We've seen an increase in cross-border attacks against Saudi Arabia over the past year, it added. Saudi AIM missiles deployed from Saudi aircraft have been instrumental in intercepting these attacks that also put U.S. forces at risk and over 70,000 U.S. citizens in the kingdom at risk. The sale does not require congressional approval, but lawmakers can block the deal by passing a disapproval bill in the Senate and the House of Representatives. The missile sale follows the U.S. approval of a $500 million helicopter maintenance deal for the kingdom last September. Saudi Arabia's critics were quick to slam the deal on Thursday, Marianne Williamson, an author and former presidential candidate, wrote on Twitter, "This has nothing to do with making the world a better place and everything to do with fueling our defense economy. America's economy should not be built around merchandising death." As a candidate, Biden berated Saudi Arabia over the Yemen war and the killing of U.S.-based journalist Jamal Khashoggi, calling the kingdom a pariah. State Department spokesperson said the air-to-air missile sale is fully consistent with the administration's pledge to lead with diplomacy to end the Yemeni conflict, while also ensuring Saudi Arabia has a means to defend itself from Iranian-backed Houthi air attacks. The Saudi intervention in Yemen started in 2015 when the kingdom and a coalition of its regional allies started a bombing campaign against the country's Houthi rebels, who had taken over the capital Sana'a and much of the country. Saudi Arabia considers the Houthis to be Iranian proxies, allegations that both the rebels and Tehran reject. The war has spurred a massive humanitarian crisis. The United Nations said last year that approximately 233,000 people died as a result of the conflict. Amid increasing cross-border attacks by the Houthis and an offensive by the rebels to take the strategic city of Marib, Saudi Arabia offered a ceasefire in Yemen in March. But the Houthis rejected the proposal, stressing that the Saudi-led an air and sea blockade on the country must be lifted without conditions before the fighting will end. Middle East Eye headliner, Saudi-led coalition says troops redeploying, not withdrawing. Dated November 11, 2021. Saudi-led coalition fighting rebel Houthis in Yemen said on Wednesday its troops were redeploying in line with its strategy to support Yemen forces, but were not withdrawing. Yemeni security sources told Reuters the Saudi military had withdrawn from a major military base in Burqaya district in the southern port of Aden, removing troops, hardware, and heavy artillery. Some of the troops and equipment were loaded onto ships in Aden port, while others flew out from the city's airport, the sources said. Long convoys of the kingdom's military were seen on Tuesday heading into Burqaya military base to Aden port, witnesses said. General Turki al-Malki, the spokesman for the Saudi-led coalition, told Reuters reports circulated about a Saudi military withdrawal from southern Yemen were baseless and unfounded. Malki went on to say movement and redeployment of troops based on operational and tactical assessment was a standard operation in all military forces across the world. Saudi Arabia has faced intense diplomatic pressure from the United States and the United Nations to end the 7-year conflict that has killed tens of thousands and put millions at risk. U.S. envoy to Yemen, Timothy Lindesberg, visited Riyadh this week as Washington pressured Saudi Arabia to lift the blockade on Houthi-held points, a condition for the group to start ceasefire talks. However, Riyadh wants U.S. weapons to help the kingdom strengthen its defense systems following Houthi attacks on its territory with drones and ballistic missiles. Late on Wednesday, heavy blasts were heard across the Yemeni capital, Sana'a, following airstrikes by the coalition's warplanes, residents said. This followed several ballistic missiles fired by the Houthis on Saudi southern regions and the Yemeni provinces of Marib and Taiz, the Houthi military spokesman said. Ambassadors of the 5 permanent UN Security Council members also held a meeting with Saudi Ambassador to Yemen, Mohammed al-Jabir, where they stressed the need for de-escalation, including an immediate end to hostilities in the Marib region. All Yemeni parties should engage in genuine dialogue in order to reach a comprehensive political solution to end the crisis in Yemen and alleviate the humanitarian suffering of its people. A statement issued after the meeting said. The UN Security Council blacklisted 3 Houthi leaders on Wednesday for threatening the peace, security, and stability of Yemen, subjecting them to a global asset freeze and travel ban from a targeted arms embargo. The 15 council members agreed by consensus to impose sanctions on the head of the general staff leading the Houthis' Marib offensive, Mohammed Abd al-Karim al-Ghanani, a leader of Houthi forces assigned to the Marib province and the Marib advance. Youssef al-Madini and the Houthis' assistant defense minister, Salah Mesfer Salah al-Sharir, was accused of helping the group acquire smuggled arms and weapons. The coalition, led by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, intervened in Yemen in 2015 after Houthi forces ousted the internationally recognized government from Sana'a. The Houthis say they are fighting a corrupt system and aggression by Saudi-led forces. United Arab Emirates has scaled down its military presence in the country since 2019. That's the latest news. Now my thoughts. Going back to Biden's alleged ending of his support for the Yemeni war back in February, where Biden announced an end to the U.S. support for Saudi-led military offensive weapons in Yemen, was a farce. His own quote, which he said in a speech at the State Department, that, quote, "This war has to end, and to underscore our commitment, we're ending all American support for offensive weapon operations in the war in Yemen, including relevant arms sales," end quote. That's a direct quote from him in February 2021. Has anything changed? Well, just like he said to a group dinner of his political backers before the election, in which Biden declared nothing will fundamentally change. Well, in this case, with Saudi Arabia and Israel, nothing did fundamentally change. When it comes to the political backers, when it comes to the military industrial complex, when it comes to the 1%, when it comes to the Federal Reserve, when it comes to foreign lobbyists, which are the most important institutions, when it comes to global recognized power, nothing will fundamentally change. The only thing that will change are the trivial necessities that they see upon the American people when it comes to social programs and financial aid. They'll drag on those bills for years and months and years, haggle with each other when it comes to you, American people. At the very least, you had a group of prominent House Democrats just yesterday criticizing the Biden administration's decision to move with the $650 million arms sale. And those 7 people were Tom Malinowski, Jim McGovern, Adam Schiff, Ilhan Omar, and others, being hypocritical. But it just goes to show you that Biden is not a progressive in this point. I mean, anybody who is still supporting this administration is still supporting the same old song, just a different singer, all these decades and going back to the past century. And anybody who still votes for any Democrat or Republican, either you're in denial or you're a part of the problem. The largest humanitarian crisis in the world in Yemen, well, now it's well over 233,000. It's more like 700, approximately, depending on the numbers of the human rights organizations and their reports. The amount of casualties is still to be tallied. But right now, as we speak, we have 12,907 Yemeni civilians killed. $91,600 people killed overall in the Yemen war, according to a 2016 report. Okay, that was 5 years ago. It's much more than that. And the U.S., under Trump and under Biden, continue this nonsensical war. And it's basically a war on the Shia Muslims, which are being, of course, this is being blamed on Iran. What else? And it's also a reason to attack the Houthis, who don't want a corrupt Gulf leader in Yemen. Remember, Yemen was the second largest country, well, the second most influential country when it comes to Al Qaeda many years ago. No, in fact, it wasn't that many, 20. The USS Cole bombing. It was also being, as well as being behind the Millennium Plot, which involved Yemen and Jordan in Saudi Arabia. So you have a contingent of extremists in this country that still exists today. Where do they come from? Well, the Wahhabi ideology. Well, who's the epicenter of the Wahhabi ideology? Saudi Arabia. You can't tell me that this has nothing to do with that. This is a war based on, when it comes to Saudi Arabia, this is a war against Sunni and Shia. But the majority of the Sunni world condemns Saudi Arabia because they're not the representatives, the true representatives of Islam. They're the heretics. In every bit of sense as the Christians are heretics in the South in the United States, evangelicals, prosperity gospels, those who are behind the Zionist movement. They don't know anything about Christ. These are nationalists. These are people who aren't of any type of spiritual nature. These are criminals, hypocrites, whose first response is not dialogue, it's war and death. This war has been going on since March 26th of 2015. You would think that the Biden administration, if they were who they said they were before the election, even after the election, in which he announced he was going to end the conflict and end all military sales to Saudi Arabia. I know what happened. So Saudi Arabia threatened them, and this is for those people who don't think we have a Gulf lobby powerful enough. They're the ones who control the oil market regarding the Middle East. And if they are slow to produce those barrels per day, guess who suffers? That's right, you. This is what happens when we are at the hands in regards to fossil fuels, especially oil, to a corrupt, malign regime in the kingdom. And the Sadari 7, led by Ibn Saud's seven son lineage. These are corrupt, powerful people who don't have the best interests of Americankind because they have nothing in common with us. But that's the power of black gold, which is oil. And because we have so much at stake in that country, that we act as its military arm. Well, guess who suffers? The Yemenis suffer. The Iranians suffer. The Libyans, the Syrians, the Jordanians. And in the future, it'll be us, the American people, who suffer economically. Because we're allowing this to happen. And we should be speaking up, speaking out against it in the streets, not divided, but united.